Welcome once again, wherever you may be. No extracts from Gurdjieff this week. I'm going to read out something from Rodney Collin about the planets. And then later on I might talk about the idea of the true will. Certain qualifying remarks should be perhaps made here, which refer to the whole principle of analogy that we have so freely used. It is not to be deduced that the solar system is a transformer of electric current, nor that the planets are made of antimony, bismuth, iron, and so on. What is proposed is that the laws which on one scale permit the construction of a transformer are the same laws as those of another scale that produce the solar system. The planets may not be transforming electrical energy such as we know it to the higher voltages and lower amperages, but they are transforming some unknown energy in a comparable way. Similarly, though the planets are not necessarily composed of the metals mentioned, they are mostly probably made of substances which in some way stand in the same relation to each other as these metals do, just as the notes do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do stand in the same relation, whether they are set in a higher or in a lower octave. The laws are universal. Mechanisms through which they work are similar on many scales, but the materialization of the laws and the constituents and products of the mechanisms will vary according to the elements available on the level under consideration. Thus, a spring is the same mechanism obeying the same law, whether it is applied to move the hands of a wristwatch or to propel an arrow from a bow. But it is made of a different material according to the elements in that scale. It must also be understood that every analogy, even the most exact and illuminating, is incomplete. It only explains one aspect of the phenomenon and may leave out another side which is equally important. The aptness of analogies drawn from the mechanical operation of laws in magnetism or physics must never lead us to forget that the solar system in its every part gives indication of life and intelligence. We are dealing not with coils or ripples, but we have every reason to believe with living beings of a power and nature incomprehensible to us, though we can apprehend their existence and aspect. Bearing this in mind, we may try to come to a clear conception of such higher beings by proposing many different analogies, each of which may add something to our understanding. Thus, while we remember our image of the transformer and all that it has shown us about the nature and function of the planets in relation to the sun, we must not rest content with that. We must also, for example, see the planetary sheaths around the long body of the solar system as so many prismatic lenses, each with a different refractive index, which enables it to reflect an individual colour from the white light of the sun. If then we suppose each planet to be a coloured reflector in the sky, bathing the scene with this or that particular tint, we are in fact only imagining how the solar system must appear to a cosmos as much greater than the planets as man is greater than the electrons. We can understand the effect of this very well from watching a theatrical stage, where the footlights may throw a white light upon the actors, while coloured spots from the wings tint the shadows on one side with red, on the other with green or purple. Such is the relative effect of the sun and the planets. And supposing the actors to be upon the earth or in any other part of the solar system, then the white and coloured lights will be constantly shifting their relative position and at every moment producing new effects. Now the white light of the sun will be shining from the left wing, while the footlights may shine alternately red and green, which combine to fill the stage with a soft yellowish glow. The permutations will be endless in their effects, constantly passing one into the other as the lights themselves revolve about the stage. Moreover, as we all remember from childhood visits to the pantomime, each change will suggest its own emotional mood, the same scene and characters appearing in the red light, terrible and bloody, in the green, eerie and mysterious, in the blue, spiritual and uplifting, and in the yellow, warmly benevolent and matter-of-fact. Of course, the lights themselves have no emotions, indeed they work by quite other laws, yet the effect they create on human beings is emotional, and their influence appears to us in this guise. It must be emphasized that the planets are only reflectors, only transformers. They produce no light of their own, but merely lend the sun's light a certain mood or colour. They produce no current of their own, but only adapt the current provided by the sun for this or that particular use. An even better understanding of the role of the planets may be obtained by regarding them as functions of the solar system, just as digestion, respiration, voluntary movement, reason and so on are functions of the cosmos of man. So Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter and the rest may be functions of the cosmos of the solar system. Between them they endow the sun with all functions and make it a complete cosmic being, possessing all possibilities. The implications of this become more clear in the light of a very important principle governing the relationship between cosmoses. Each cosmos contains 6 pairs of key organs, or batteries as it were, by which it receives influences and energy from higher cosmoses. The principle in question says that the functions of a lower cosmos derive from the organs of a higher cosmos. His ideas may not be perfect, but they invoke something. Those Western ideas about mercury and sulfur, the alchemical ideas, they are the Western way of carrying us into higher octaves. That is where it is in the Western world. In the Western world that is felt only distantly today, but is quite deep-rooted. That ancient knowledge. When people look for esoteric things, they have tried to find them in the East, not realizing they stand upon the well. I liked Collin's description of the colours of the planets. The red, the green, the blue, the yellow. I think they are accurate, and that means that he is functioning in a more objective way. Other people might say many things. In fact, this week I was speaking to somebody about some problems he was having with the digestive system, and I suggested to him that he do the 5 yogic exercises. They're called Shankar Prakshalana. I was taught them 25 years ago in an Indian school. But when I looked that up on the internet, I saw that particularly the Americans have invented countless different nonsenses, different combinations of yogas and this, and They have no respect over there for the idea that you might learn from somebody else. And that is why most of the things that come from America are just like smashed glass. They're just shards exploding into space. There is no line of knowledge like the sun rays coming from an integral nation. That is their problem. Let it not become our problem. How to say, I just looked up Collin's ideas about the vibrations of the colour of materials being due to the vibrations of the electrons, and it sort of corresponds to what the scientific community says today. But the thing is, the way the scientific community talks, they have so many experiments, they have so many experimental results, and still they don't know anything, because they don't feel it inside, because they only use their eyes, meaning their mental center, to understand things. They never feel it with the body as well, and therefore their knowledge is never objective. It is never truthful, it never feels satisfying, because there is no law of three in it. They see only through one center, and when they see only through one center, they cannot triangulate to ken something. To ken, or to catch the knowledge, means that three centers have to fire three different beams of knowledge at it, and only then can you see it correctly. And that is down to the integration of the centers that is caused by hard labours and real being a part of good old duty. And one additional result of doing that is what is called self-remembering. Because you are coating, when you do that, there is the beginning of a very thin second body that also has a view of the situation. That view that comes from the higher being bodies can self-remember, particularly if you solidify it with additional practices. That's the meaning of that practice. A few tangential ideas came to me this week. One was the idea of the pleasures of the flesh. Which are the flesh without a soul? Because, if you're married to somebody, you're not married to a body, a corpse. You're married to their soul. That is who you speak to. You might look at somebody and see their body, but actually, truthfully speaking, you're actually experiencing their higher being bodies. Life is not a flat picture of dead bodies. No, a person is their soul and their soul emanation, and what you experience with them. What you call your friend is actually the experience you have with them as your energies in this mutual nourishment. That is life. Certainly in my lifetime, people that I knew when I was young, they had much more of a character of a person who had life experiences, whereas today people have less character. And I wanted to say something about numbers. The numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, these numbers and mathematics. There's something wrong about that, because everything is living, and you can't have a number which is an abstract concept that isn't living. Everything is living. There's no exceptions to that. And with conceptual theories, where do they really live? Well, they're actually held in the body of people that knows them. And if those people die, the knowledge is lost. And all you end up is these kind of words written on a page that other people are not going to remember. Gurdjieff would probably explain that by saying that this society has created picture form being data that they have shared together in order to comprehend the context within which that they live. And so when you look at somebody's ideas or theories, ideologies and philosophies, you actually see the picture form data that a contiguous group of people in their own society has formed. Words and ideas and thoughts and numbers do not live outside of the people themselves and their life histories and their life journeys. And it would be an evil thing if they did. Anyway, I just happened to see some Mennonite Amish churches in America. They were broadcasting something they do every few months where you can see their meetings, and believe me, they look exactly the same as Harrison Ford in Witness. You know, the women sit with their bonnets and the men in their suits, and they're quiet and plain and earnest and clear about their lives. And I felt very privileged to actually watch their meetings. They just have a few actually. But when I was watching them, I thought, wow, this is the real life, you know. And most of the conversations and literature and all the ideas that people have are to relieve the discontent of people who are living in cities who are not very happy. People who live in cities are unhappy in a way that they don't even realize, because they are divorced from the real world. I'm not sure it really comes to much in the end, even to the point where I do really understand the Protestant view that, you know, the churches became too elaborate and confused and magical, and, you know, is it really necessary? Are we not here simply to be honest men and women and to do this work and to live our lives as well as we can in faith and in trust? And I don't think there's a better life than that. And although I live quite plainly, it would be quite hard for me if I were to put on the plain clothes of the Amish and walk down the high street to Brighton. It's hard for anybody to do that in a context that has a different idea, you know. Gurdjieff talked about conscience, our real conscience, and living from conscience, which is still alive within us, even though our heads may be quite deluded about things. Still, somewhere buried inside, we can know what is true from the sense we have inside of us. This is slightly correspondent to Mr. Crowley's ideas of the true will, and I'm going to read something from the Master Therion. The key to this message is the word will. The first obvious meaning of this law is confirmed by antithesis. The word of sin is a restriction. Thou hast no right but to do thy will. Do that, and no other shall say nay. For pure will, unassuaged of purpose, delivered from the lust of result, is every way perfect. Take this carefully. It seems to imply a theory that if every man and every woman did his or her will, the true will, there would be no clashing. Every man and every woman is a star, and every star moves in an appointed path without interference. There is plenty of room for all. It is only disorder that creates confusion. From these considerations, it should be clear that do what thou wilt does not mean do what you like. It is the apotheosis of freedom, but it is also the strictest possible bond. Do what thou wilt, then do nothing else. Let nothing deflect thee from that austere and holy task. Liberty is absolute, do thy will, but seek to do any other thing whatever, and instantly obstacles must arise. Every act that is not indefinite course of that one orbit is erratic, a hindrance. Will must not be two but one. Note further that this will is not only to be pure, that is single, but also unassuaged of purpose. This strange phrase must give us pause. It may mean that any purpose in the will would damp it. Clearly the lust of result is a thing from which it must be delivered. But the phrase may also be interpreted as if it read, with purpose unassuaged, i.e. with a tireless energy. The conception is therefore of an eternal motion, infinite and unalterable. It is a nirvana, only dynamic instead of static. Only dynamic instead of static, and this comes to the same thing in the end. The obvious practical task of the magician is then to discover what his will really is, so that he may do it in this manner, and he can best accomplish this by the practices of Liber Tisab, or such others as may from time to time be appointed. It should now be perfectly simple for everybody to understand the message of the Master Therion. Love is the law, love under will. I can only imagine that there's a sort of Irish poetic influence underneath it which, connects us to an old world. Wherever you look, if you look in the Taoist sages or the Indian sages, or even the idea of the Mennonites, it is more or less the same idea, to return to the uncarved block. But I think that it would be helpful, and I will try to help, by clarifying certain things. These kinds of statements that Therion made today are inspiring because they are one-pointed and they show the summit and adjure you to reach the summit. But the truth is, very much like with the non-comprehension of modern science, the truth is that in order to reach the peak, many other things have to happen first, and people don't talk about them so much. But it is in that exploration and expansion that a bridge is slowly, painstakingly and arduously, gruelingly built from this world into that one. Often it is that a sage will reach his destination and not even be able to explain what had happened, even if it took him 20 years. And he may say that nothing happened, but everything happened. He just didn't see it. For there is a path and there is an actual staircase that must be walked and must be built. And it is only when you unpack the bodies and the energetic flow of transmission and the radiations of human beings and how things are really happening, if you could see that, then you could understand what happens on the journey. And although the base of the mountain and the peak of the mountain may be a stable cross, and everything in between be unstable, in the end you see that everything lives. Everything has a cycle of life, no matter how high and how low. And to live at any level, there are rules, there are ways to live well, to follow the seasons, and sometimes to work against them, to come together for a particular reason, to complete that reason and then once again divide. The sage is the one who knows the hour that is at hand and what is needed, and who does what needs to be done at any hour and at every hour, and is otherwise silent. In the name of God.